I am Mike Myatt, and I'm like the landlord here at the Marines Memorial, and I celebrated my 11th anniversary here on the 10th. And the best part about being here is to be able to be with folks like you, because our mission here at the Marines Memorial is to commemorate the service and sacrifices of Americans who served in our nation's wars. Our second part is to educate the public about those sacrifices, which I'll tell you is our most difficult task. And the third thing we're here to do is to provide services to those young men and women serving today in the U.S. military.
And it is a great pleasure to introduce the Consul General of South Korea, Lee Jeong-Gwen.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so honored to be here today so that I could express my gratitude to all of you, brave warriors for defending Korea's freedom and democracy. Thank you. Your selfless sacrifices and your unwavering resolve in the Korean War continue to be remembered and honored by the Korean people, and you deserve more thanks than words can express. We also remember those who did not make it home, who are among the eternal guardians of our shores. The United States Marine Corps were an integral part of the successful defense of Korea. The Incheon landing and the Battle of Incheon marked the turning point of the Korean War, and this was largely due to the efforts of the U.S. Marine Corps. The war might have had a very different outlook, were it not for your fearless charge on Incheon's shores. After the war, the Korean people were able to recover and maintain its forward momentum with the support of the United States and its mighty military. As a result, Korea achieved economic development and political stability within one generation. We now strive to help other nations in need through donations and peacekeeping missions as a way of giving back to the world in memory of the support from the United States and the United Nations during our most desperate time of need. Although Korea and the United States are very far apart, geographically and culturally, our alliance is a blood alliance, forged by thousands of brave men who fought together to push back against the communist regime. This bond is being strengthened to this day as the Republic of Korea and the United States works toward the common goal of maintaining peace and promoting democracy worldwide. The recently enacted free trade agreement between our two countries is just one of many aspects of Korea and the United States' long-term relationship. I have no doubt in my mind that our two countries will continue our history of friendship and mutual benefit long into the future. Without your bravery and sacrifice, Korea would have looked very different from the prosperous and developed nation that it is today. Korea continues to progress and prosper through learning from our past of war and poverty and by the examples of our brave heroes. I also want to take this moment to congratulate all of you in the Korean War Memorial Foundation for securing a site for the Korean War Memorial in the Presidium. This will be a wonderful, lasting tribute to all of the brave souls that fought in the Korean War, and I look forward to seeing its progress to completion in the next few years. I hope for your continued support of the friendship of the Republic of Korea and the United States as we continue to remember our friends and heroes in our hearts, as we always will. Thank you again for having me at this event and for giving me an opportunity to honor all of you and all of those who gave their lives for what we have today. Thank you very much.
We have another very important speaker here today who I have the privilege of introducing, but before I do, I just want to remind all of you, but especially all you Korean veterans, the importance of our reserve units in all of our armed forces. For had it not been for the reserve units in 1950, we possibly would not have been able to be here today with the Consul General and our Korean friends who are honoring us for saving their country and helping to bring the peace to that part of the world. Those reserves, we had been cut back by Congress, as they have a way of doing things. And we were really at a very poor stand of military at the time. But those reserves came in. They were called ready reserves in those days, and God bless them all. We put them out to sea and put them on to the Pusan Peninsula, which is the keynote of today's memorial, or today's program about Korea and the Korean veterans. They had been pushed back, the South Korean Army, all the way to the sea. They were about ready to drop into the Sea of Japan. When those reserves arrived and the 1st Marine Brigade arrived, we started to push back, and then we had Incheon and so forth, and the rest, as they say, is history. Well, at this time, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Lieutenant Colonel Todd Zinc. Let's give a warm welcome to Lieutenant Colonel Todd Zinc.
I promised the gunny I'd keep this to 20 minutes or he would kick me off the stage. So I'm going to listen to the gunny. All good officers listen to their gunnies. It's true. I think it's appropriate. I'm going to speak to the reserves. The theme of my quick speech is going to be titled Patriotism, Vigor, and Cooperation of the Reserves in the Korean Conflict and to Today. But before I get into this, I'd like to quickly do some acknowledgments. First and foremost, Colonel Starling was initially asked to be here today. He is the regimental commander of 23rd Marines just down the road here at San Bruno. Unfortunately, he could not make it today due to operational commitments, and he felt it was appropriate based on my recent deployment as a reserve battalion commander that I speak before you here today. I do find it, I think at this point in time, I would like to acknowledge from the current Marine Corps as a representative, I want to let each and every one of the Korean War vets of all the services here that of our deepest gratitude for your service. You are really the aspiration that current Marines aspire to when they're in combat. And the Korean conflict has a special place in most Marines' hearts. From the Marine Corps today, I want to pass on to you our deepest appreciation for your service to the country and to the Corps. Quickly about the reserves. The reserves haven't been around since 1775. They came about in 1917, believe it or not. The first Federal Reserve came to light. And it really wasn't until after World War II, 1948, that the reserves really took a sense of permanence in our military structure that we know today. It was in 1948 that the military felt it was appropriate to give the Marines pay for their drill and to set them up on some form of retirement. Certain reserve Marines that you may have heard of, or certain reserve veterans you may have heard of before World War II that are noteworthy is, believe it or not, Colonel Chesty Puller was a reserve officer for a short period of time. Theodore Roosevelt Jr., Congressional Medal of Honor winner, I believe, as well as a general, was a reserve Army officer for a period of time. But during this time frame, 1948, life was still good in the United States. We were the sole victors after, obviously, the largest conflict in recent history. America was getting itself back together. We were going back to work, improving our lives. And then the world changed rather abruptly on that June 25th, 1950 date, when the North Korean army invaded the South, somewhat unexpectedly. And again, we allowed our military, as the gunny mentioned, to reduce itself to such a degree that we were ill-prepared for this invasion. And coming back off the success of World War II, we underestimated our enemy in the North Korean army. And we thought they were just going to turn and run when they faced us. But that wasn't the case. And things were getting critical, as the gunny was talking about. We got pushed almost into the sea relatively quickly. The reserves, the Army reserves, were recalled 5 days after the invasion on June 30th. And based on concerns of a global communist war beyond the peninsula at this time, they felt it necessary to put the inactive reserve to the front lines first. Most of these inactive reserves, fortunately, were still veterans of World War II, so had that experience to rely on, but had been out of active service as a reserve and as an active military person for probably 5 years. General MacArthur, at this point, was already devising the plan to relieve the immense pressure on the Pusan Peninsula with the amphibious landing in Incheon. But as these plans were unfolding, merely 10 days after the initial invasion, Task Force Smith was defeated. Time was critical. General MacArthur, the Marines not yet committed to the war itself, asked the Marine Corps to field a wartime Marine division. So with that order from General MacArthur on June 7th, just 2 days after the defeat of Task Force Smith, 1st Provisional Marine Brigade reinforced was stood up and activated at Camp Pendleton. The problem was the Marine Corps had lowered its ranks so much after World War II that they were desperate to find bodies to fill this order from General MacArthur. They were scrounging all over the country. They were pulling security Marines off post. They were pulling Marines out of Japan. They were pulling them anywhere they could get their hands on them to fill this requirement that General MacArthur thought was necessary to relieve the immense pressure on the Pusan perimeter. The Marine Corps was falling short on these numbers. So they turned to their reserves. So on June 19th, the Marine Corps Reserve was called to duty. All 33,000 Marines that were active reserves were called to serve, once again, of 138 units. By September 11th, which is coincidentally just yesterday, they had activated all of their units. Now, they had shown up for duty, but the problem is the Marine Corps had not necessarily ever done this before, to such a degree. And there was such a rush to get the Marines together, to get them into Incheon, that they started to do interviews with the Marines, because they didn't have the time to actually see them firsthand and evaluate each and every Marine. So they would interview them as to whether or not they were combat ready or non-combat ready. And guess what the Marine said? Even if he really wasn't non-combat ready, you know what the Marine said? Hell yeah, I'm going forward. You know. So these Marines, to their credit, were bold and unafraid and had courage, but may not have had the training that we would have liked to have given them prior to going into the Korean conflict. In addition to this, having been mobilized now twice with the Marine Reserve after 9/11, believe it or not, some of the record books got messed up. They also, some of the pay got messed up. Some of the MOSs may have gotten mismatched. But in typical Marine Corps fashion, we forged ahead, and they got these guys ready to go to head over to Korea. To say the least, they didn't get all the retraining that we would have liked to have given them prior to going there. But we didn't have time, was not on our side. The Pusan perimeter needed to be relieved immediately, or the war could potentially have been lost, and the North Koreans would have reinforced the Incheon area. So the Marines went over and landed on Incheon, which was an immediate relief valve to the people in the Pusan perimeter. And I think it's no better put than Major General Smith, who was in charge, who said, without the reserves at the Incheon landing on September 15th, without the reserves, the Incheon landing on September 15th would have been impossible. And I think there's been a lot of talk, before I get into the current reserves, but I think we all know the outcome of this was that we have South Korea. And it's one of the strongest democracies in all of East Asia. But I think the most symbolic representation of that, if you've ever seen it, is if you look on the Google images of the Korean Peninsula at night from a satellite view. And if you've ever seen this, it's a stark contrast. The South Korea is lit fully. You can actually see where the 38th parallel is from the space. North Korea is dark to the world. So I read a Marine Corps after-action comments on the reserves in the Korean conflict, and they attributed many reasons why the reserves did well, but the last one they ended on, the one that they felt was most significant, was the fact that the Marine Corps Reserve succeeded because of their patriotism, their vigor, and their cooperation. Now, I want to speak briefly to the current conflict that has now been going on for 11 years. Again, our country seems to live history over and over again sometimes. This current conflict, keep in mind where we were before 9/11. America was doing pretty well. We had won the Cold War. We had won the Gulf War. We had won many small conflicts, including Grenada and Panama. And economically, we were the only great power left on the face of the earth at this time. But then our world changed again on 9/11. And it's fitting that you have this ceremony here today, because it was just yesterday that we honored those that passed on 9/11, 11 years earlier. Again, our nation found itself ill-prepared to fight an enemy such as Al-Qaeda. And we were scrambling to address this. And I can speak from personal experience. In October, when I was with the reserve unit close to my home in Los Angeles, we were called to active duty in late January, a few months after. And the Reserve Marines across the nation were called to either be on standby or activated. And the Reserve Marines of today were sent, and the unit I was with was sent to Camp Pendleton. And our initial mission was very atypical for a Marine. Marines are very comfortable shooting weapons and very comfortable aggressing an enemy to their front. But we were expected to be trained in less than lethal munitions because our country was on such a heightened state of alert, ready for the other shoe to drop. So we were part of a quick reaction force to respond to any further terrorist attacks west of the Mississippi. But my friend and I, my friend who's a veteran as well, we took it upon ourselves to say, you know what, we're going to maintain our conventional weapons skills training because we feel good about maintaining that. And we did so, and it was fortunate that we elected that because General Mattis, since we had been on active duty for already a year and had a great deal of unit cohesion there at Camp Pendleton established, he asked us, the battalion, to go forward with 1st Marine Division, particularly Regimental Combat Team 1, into Iraq. And all that training we maintained in our conventional training paid off as we marched up the Mesopotamian Valley to secure the eastern half of Baghdad. But this just shows today's Reserve Marines, we're putting more and more on their shoulders. So here was in this one conflict, they were required to be skilled at less than lethal munitions and maintain their conventional warfighting capability in the event either event unfolded. Now let's speed forward through time. This seems like a lifetime ago to me. This was back in 2003. I stayed in the reserves, and then I can speak to the reserves' involvement in Operation Enduring Freedom, 11 TAC 1. Last year, leading the only reserve infantry battalion in Afghanistan, one of 7 battalions there. If you know anything about the current conflict and what we're expecting of these Marines, we hold them to the very same standards we would expect any Marine to go into harm's way. But the requirements are tremendous these days. It's called counterinsurgency. And counterinsurgency is probably one of the more complicated wars you can find yourself in because the enemy elects not to wear uniforms. They don't like to aggress you head on. You have to win the hearts and minds of the local people. And we had to train them, so we had to do our own screening. We still do our own screening in the reserves. We did that over a year out. We all went to Camp Pendleton too, just like the Marines that went over to Korea. Probably at Camp Margarita maybe, same spot, who knows. But while we did our training, we trained hard for 5 months straight before we went over. And I'm happy to say today the training that the Reserves Marines is really unparalleled. It is absolutely outstanding the way we prepare these young men before they go into harm's way. We prepare them in cultural and language training. They learn all this stuff. They learn how to understand the hierarchy in the Afghan culture so they know who the influential people are. They learn how to handle IED dogs. They learn how to handle UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles. They learn how to drive sophisticated vehicles called MRAPs and MATVs, which look like small spaceships at night the way they're lit up. We train them on a whole plethora of skills so they're prepared for any contingency that may come their way. And I'm happy to say the Reserve Marines, I can speak for 123, responded to that. And what they also did is they brought an added skill that is critical in the counterinsurgency. And that is they brought their life experience as a citizen from their communities. And you may ask, as a Korean War vet, what in the world would my experience as a citizen back in my community do me any good in war? With a counterinsurgency, it's the combination of military skills and non-military skills that determines success. Not only are you securing an area for the Afghans, but you are also promoting economic development, bringing legitimacy to their government, and providing essential services. And it's that combination of those lines of operation that determines success currently right now in Afghanistan. So I can say the Marines that serve today, the Reserve Marines that serve today, share the same characteristics as the Reserve Marines and Army that served in the Korean conflict, and the number one contributing factor to their success is their patriotism, vigor, and cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colonel Zinc. At this time, it is my distinct pleasure to call upon Major Billy Canedo, United States Marine Corps. Where are you, sir? Over here, Over there. We have, he has brought some Department of Defense certificates that are signed by the Secretary of Defense for the Korean veterans. Major.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, please let me say thank you first to Major General Myatt, to Mr. Lee Jeong-Gwen, the Consul General of Korea, and especially to all those veterans of the Korean War who are our VIPs for today. God bless you, and thank you very much for your warm welcome. I'm not going to make any remarks. I'm just going to go into the certificates. But before I do that, let me just ask, are there any veterans of World War II here among us? If you could raise your hand or please stand so that we can recognize you. It is on your shoulders that we all stand. And veterans of World War II returned to a good amount of fanfare, as some of you may know. The veterans of Korea didn't receive any thank you at all. And it got worse. The veterans of Vietnam got spit on. Now, when I went to Iraq, and when Colonel Zinc and his men went to Afghanistan and also to Iraq, when we were at the airport, there were people who applauded us as we left, and people who applauded as we returned, and that's a direct result of you and the experiences that happened to you. And I believe personally that our country has come now full circle to understand that you don't have to necessarily agree with the conflict or the reasons for it, but you have to continue to support the American fighting man and American fighting women. And it is in that vein, I believe that the Secretary of Defense, in an effort to try and right a wrong, has signed for the first time these certificates of appreciation for this conflict. Let me first read one of these certificates for you. It says, Certificate of Appreciation in recognition of honorable service during the Korean War in defense of democracy and freedom. Through your selfless sacrifice, the tide of communism on the Korean Peninsula was halted, and liberty triumphed over tyranny. The Department of Defense and the people of America and Korea are forever grateful. Signed, Leon E. Panetta, Secretary of Defense. On behalf of the Secretary of Defense and a grateful nation, thank you for your honorable service in Korea. May God bless and keep you always.
We now have a Korean War Memorial Medal delivery by the Consul General of Korea.
오늘 이 자리를 초청해 주신 우리 머린코트 그룹 Thank you very much. 여러분들은 우리 대한민국을 위해서 공적을 너무 많이 쌓으시고 우리 한미 우호 정신에 입각해서 우리를 대한민국을 키워줬습니다. Thank you very much.
Well, it's not in the schedule, but I will translate the best as I could. And first of all, President Lee thanked the Marine Corps, the organizing committee, to invite him here today, and he's honored to be here. And on behalf of the Korean War Veterans Associations, and the Korean War veterans, especially Marine Corps, you are your sacrifice is truly respected by the not only Korean War veterans but Korean citizens of all.
그래서 오늘 여러분들의 노고를 위해서 우리 대한민국 정부에서 여러분들에게 보훈직 용감한 증명을 하기 위해서 용감한 전사, 용감한 병장으로서 여러분들에게 우리 총영사님이 우리 한국 대표로서 오늘 저하고 같이 여러분들에게 80세 이상 되는 몇 분에게 이런 메달과 증서를 드리겠습니다.
So for this special occasions, we'd like to recognize the brave Korean War veterans who is 80 years or over. Okay, yeah. So, and our honorable Korean Consul General, the Mr. Lee, will be on behalf of the Korean government will be award the medal and the citations. For this citation is the bravery, the Veterans Award.
여러분들이 우리 대한민국을 전쟁의 불바다가 된 나라를 여러분들이 유엔 국가와 더불어 우리를 키워주셨고 우리는 재건해가지고 대한민국의 훌륭한 경제대국이 돼가지고 원조 받던 나라가 원조를 해주고 있는 대한민국이 되었습니다. Thank you.
During the Korean War, Korea was in flame. All the building was, in dust. That nothing was exist. But your contribution and UN, United Nations, the allied, and Korea is now not only receiving the aid, but now Korea is turned around and we give aid to the many country who needs our help. So thank you very much for that.
Through careful negotiations with members of the Houses of Congress and the management of the Presidio, we were able to convince them of the desirability of having a Korean War monument. We have succeeded in having the location determined. It's going to be immediately at the entrance of the National Cemetery at the Presidio. It's a beautiful location. The base of it is going to be 8 to 10 feet tall, and on top of that is going to be a replica of the landing craft at Incheon. It's going to be a beautiful, beautiful event. That was phase one of what we're talking about. We have succeeded in the site selection, and now we're going into the design. And we have various design firms submitting their ideas on how to craft this and put it together, and we expect to make a determination quite soon. We expect to have, and you'll see in the handouts that there's a brochure outstanding outlining exactly what it is that everyone can do by way of participating in terms of having your name on a brick. And with $100 on the brick, you can submit it for review and adoption by our group. We intend to raise $3 million in order to maintain a continuing monument to those Korean veterans. It's also going to give the names of all of the various members that we can determine who will be cited on the wall of the monument, and we look forward to your participation, by way of contribution. And if you have any ideas how you can assist us, please let me know. Otherwise, God bless all of you for being here, and God bless you in spirit for fighting that war. Thank you.
And we have a resolution from the Senate, State of California, Certificate of Recognition, presented to the Marines Memorial Club on the 62nd anniversary. Man, that's hard to read. The California State Senate honors and recognizes the Marines Memorial Club on the occasion of the 62nd anniversary of the Korean War. We commend its dedication to honoring the men and women who have served our country and applaud its exemplary service to our community. We further wish to commend success to all its future endeavors. Signed September 12, 2012, Leland Y. Yee, California State Senate. Don, will you see that the general gets this, please? Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, as a final tribute, eternal Lord God, who through many generations have united our members of the armed services who have served all over the world. Let's grant thy blessing upon their efforts and endeavors. We honored our past heroes and salute the current generation. May there always be men and women such as you who have the courage, honor, and loyalty to serve our country. We ask these things in the name of Him who courage never fails, our Redeemer, Jesus Christ. Amen. Hope to see everybody next year.